20th Century Ghost by Joe Hill. The best time to see her is when the place is almost full. There is the well-known story of the man who wanders in for a late show and finds the vast 600-seat theater almost deserted. Halfway through the movie, he glances around and discovers her sitting next to him in a chair that only moments before had been empty. Her witness stares at her. She turns her head and stares back. She has a nosebleed. Her eyes are wide, stricken. "My head hurts," she whispers. "I have to step out for a moment. Will you tell me what I missed?" It is in this instant that the person looking at her realizes she is as insubstantial as the shifting blue ray of light cast by the projector. It is possible to see the next seat over through her body. As she rises from her chair, she fades away. Then there is the story about the group of friends who go into the Rosebud together on a Thursday night. One of the bunch sits down next to a woman by herself, a woman in blue. When the movie doesn't start right away, the person who sat down beside her decides to make conversation. "What's playing tomorrow?" he asks her. "The theater is dark tomorrow," she whispers. "This is the last show." Shortly after the movie begins, she vanishes. On the drive home, the man who spoke to her is killed in a car accident. These and many of the other best-known legends of the Rosebud are false. The ghost stories of people who have seen too many horror movies and who think they know exactly how a ghost story should be. Alex Sheldon, who was one of the first to see Imogene Gilchrist, owns the Rosebud and at 73 still operates the projector most nights. He can always tell after talking to someone for just a few minutes whether or not they really saw her. But what he knows he keeps to himself, and he never publicly discredits anyone's story. That would be bad for business. He knows, though, that anyone who says they could see right through her didn't see her at all. Some of the put-on artists talk about blood pouring from her nose, her ears, her eyes. They say she gave them a pleading look and asked for them to find somebody to bring help. But she doesn't bleed that way. And when she wants to talk, it isn't to tell someone to bring a doctor. A lot of the pretenders begin their stories by saying, "You'll never believe what I just saw." They're right. He won't. Although he will listen to all they have to say with a patient, even, encouraging smile. The ones who have seen her don't come looking for Alec to tell him about it. More often than not, he finds them. Comes across them wandering the lobby on unsteady legs. They've had a bad shock. They don't feel well. They need to sit down a while. They don't ever say, "You won't believe what I just saw." The experience is still too immediate. The idea that they might not be believed doesn't occur to them until later. Often they are in a state that might be described as subdued, even submissive. When he thinks about the effect she has on those who encounters her, he thinks of Stephen Greenberg coming out of the Birds one cool Sunday afternoon in 1963. Stephen was just 12 then, and it would be another 12 years before he went and got so famous. He was at that time not a golden boy, but just a boy. Alec was in the alley behind the Rosebud having a smoke when he heard the fire door into the theater clang open behind him. He turned to see a lanky kid leaning in the doorway, just leaning there, not going in or out. The boy squinted into the harsh white sunshine with the confused, wondering look of a small child who has just been shaken out of a deep sleep. Alec could see past him into a darkness filled with the shrill sounds of thousands of squeaking sparrows. Beneath that, he could hear a few in the audience stirring restlessly, beginning to complain. "Hey kid, in or out?" Alec said. "You're letting the light in." The kid, Alec didn't know his name then, turned his head and stared back into the theater for a long, searching moment. Then he stepped out, and the door settled shut behind him, closing gently on its pneumatic hinge. And still, he didn't go anywhere, didn't say anything. The Rosebud had been showing the Birds for 2 weeks, and although Alec had seen others walk out before it was over, none of the early exits had been 12-year-old boys. It was the sort of film most boys at that age waited all the year to see, but who knew? Maybe the kid had a weak stomach. "I left my Coke in the theater," the kid said, his voice distant, almost toneless. "I still had a lot of it left. You want to go back in and look for it?" And the kid lifted his eyes and gave Alec a bright look of alarm, and then Alec knew, no. Alec finished his cigarette, pitched it. I stabbed the dead lady, the kid blurted. Alec nodded. She talked to me. What did she say? He looked at the kid again and found him staring back with eyes that were now wide and round with disbelief. I need someone to talk to, she said. When I get excited about a movie, I need to talk. Alec knows when she talks to someone, she always wants to talk about the movies. She usually addresses herself to men, although sometimes she will sit and talk with a woman, Lois Weasel most notably. Alec has been working on a theory of what it is that causes her to show herself. He has been keeping notes in a legal yellow notepad. He has a list of who she appeared to and in what movie and when. Leland King, Harold and Maude, 72. Joel Harlow, Eraserhead, 77. Hal Lash, Blood Symbol, 85, and all the others. He has, over the years, developed clear ideas about what conditions are most likely to produce her, although the specifics of his theory are constantly being revised. As a young man, thoughts of her were always on his mind, or simmering just beneath the surface. She was his first and most strongly felt obsession. Then for a while, he was better. When the theater was a success and he was an important businessman in the community, Chamber of Commerce, Town Planning Board. In those days, he could go weeks without thinking about her, and then someone would see her or pretend to have seen her and stir the whole thing up again. But following his divorce, she kept the house, he moved into the one bedroom under the theater, and not long after the 8-screen Cineplex opened just outside of town, he began to obsess again. Less about her than about the theater itself. Is there any difference, though? Not really, he supposes. Thoughts of one always circling around to thoughts of the other. He never imagined he would be so old and owe so much money. He has a hard time sleeping. His head is so full of ideas, wild, desperate ideas, about how to keep the theater from failing. He keeps himself awake thinking about income, staff, saleable assets. And when he can't think about money anymore, he tries to picture where he will go if the theater closes. He envisions an old folks' home, mattresses that reek of Ben-Gay, hunched geezers with their dentures out, sitting in a musty common room, watching daytime sitcoms. He sees a place where he will passively fade away, like wallpaper that gets too much sunlight and slowly loses its color. This is bad. What is more terrible is when he tries to imagine what will happen to her if the Rosebud closes. He sees the theater stripped of its seats, an echoing empty space, drifts of dust in the corners, petrified wads of gum stuck fast to the cement. Local teens have broken in to drink and screw. He sees scattered liquor bottles, ignorant graffiti on the walls, a single grotesque used condom on the floor in front of the stage. He sees the lonely and violated place where she will fade away, or won't fade.